Has somebody ever stolen your mitzvah? Imagine there's an elderly gentleman, an elderly lady. They're trying to make their way across the street. And you go over and you say, "Can I help you cross that street over there?" And they say, "Sure." But then all of a sudden, swoops in Shimon, and they help that gentleman or that woman cross the street. They just stole your mitzvah. And you know what our rabbis say about that? They say that they owe you a whopping 10 zehuvim. There's a fine. They owe you compensation for stealing a mitzvah from you. But the question is, why does he owe you money? Why does he owe you money for stealing your mitzvah? After all, how can we put a price tag on a mitzvah that was given to us by God? Mitzvahs are priceless. Their reward is eternal. Also, our rabbis, our sages tell us that if we attempt to perform a mitzvah, even if something gets in our way, if we tried all we can, God gives us reward nonetheless. God recognizes our effort. So what did this guy, this Shimon, this person who swooped in and stole your mitzvah, what are they depriving you from that they have to reimburse you for stealing your mitzvah? So here's the thing. There's really two things when it comes to performing a mitzvah that we accomplish. A, there's the mitzvah, but B, Rambam, Maimonides tells us, he tells us as follows, V'chol hamonea atzmo misimcha. When we perform a mitzvah, there's not just the mitzvah, the action itself, but there is the enthusiasm for the mitzvah. There's the joy, there's the gladness, the exuberance that we bring in when we perform a mitzvah to God. And if anyone refrains from that simcha, if you take away that simcha, you're missing an element of performing the mitzvah in the most optimum way possible. And here we had this gentleman who swooped in, who stole that mitzvah from yourself when you're trying to help that person cross the street. They owe you for that because they stole the simcha, they stole the excitement, the exuberance of fulfilling a mitzvah of God. The Gemara in Tractate Brachos, the Talmud tells us that there were elderly people who lived to a long age in Babylon, in the land of Bavel. Tama v'amar Rav Yochanan asked, I don't understand. It says in our Torah, Leman yirbu yemechem v'mevenechem al demaksiv. It says in our Torah that who is blessed with a long life? Those who reside in the land that God chose, in the land that God designated for us, the land of Israel. If so, aval l'chutz la'aretz lo, how are there people who reside in the diaspora who still get the blessing of God to live to a ripe old age? I don't understand it, Rabbi Yochanan says. Until they answered him. Kema da'amrile, mekadme mechashche lebei kinishta. What did these elderly gentlemen do that they merited to live such a long life? They're mashkim umariv. They came early, they stayed late, and they spent the length of their days in the Beis HaKnesses, in the synagogue, in the sanctuary of God. Therefore, that is hainu da'ani lahu. That's what kept them going for all of those days. Rav Shua ben Levi says, Kinmu v'chishku v'ayla bei knishta. Come early, spend your time in the shul, stay late. Ki hechi d'toru chaye. That is how we extend our life, not just quantitatively, but qualitatively as well. But wait, the Klei Yakar asks, this still doesn't answer the question. There are so many mitzvahs that we do throughout our entire lives, but if it's only the mitzvah of living in the land of Israel, the land of God, that we merit a long life, then how does this answer the question? Great, they spent a lot of time in shul. There's a lot of mitzvahs out there in the Torah I could perform. Why did they still inherit such a long life, the Klei Yakar asks, if they weren't actually living in the land of Israel? Well, they may have thought, the Klei Yakar says, that they weren't living in God's land. But actually, we are told by our rabbis that when the Messiah comes in the end of days, we will move to the land of Israel, and we will not only take We'll only take our shuls with us. We will not take our country clubs. We will not take our houses with us. We will not take our belongings. The only thing that we take along with us is This building here, this ground over here, this shul, that is what we take with us in the end of days to the land of Israel. That's what we take with us, and that is what is eternal. These Sabe, these elderly men, these elderly people who were living in Babel, living in a diaspora, they were living in the land of Israel, he says. This land that we are in this room here, is sacred land. The chelak min admas Eretz Yisrael. It is a chelak. It is a portion of the land of Israel. And when we come in the shul every single day, it is as if we are fulfilling that mitzvah of residing in God's land. Because our shuls, our temples, they are mikdash ma'at. They are a piece of the temple that we had in Israel. They are our temples here. And it's true that back in the times before the temple was created, we had bamos. God permitted us in extenuating circumstances. We had privatized altars. We had altars in our backyard where we could worship God. But when the temple was built, we could only go to the temple. The temple became the centralized place of worship. You want the ideal place to worship God? It can't just be done in our backyards, but it has to be done in the most ideal manner. It's only fulfilled when we come to the sanctuary of God, when we come to our temple here, our mikdash ma'at. We've been put in exile. We've had to leave our shul. We've had to leave our synagogue. And we've had to leave for a very long time. Some of us this Rosh Hashanah, this is only our first time returning. Some of us, we're not even able to return yet. And I feel when we were reading this whole month, we were reading Psalm 27. We're reading the paragraph of L'David at the end of davening on a regular basis. We said in our prayers, one request, one wish King David had. I have one request from God. Shifti beves Adonai kol yemei chayai, lachsos v'nomanai v'akibei. All I want to do is reside in the temple of God for all the days of my life. We know that it's a mitzvah. We know it's a good thing to come into shul. But when we come back, do we come back simply with reluctance? Do we groan? Or do we say that we are happy, we are exuberant? We're not just fulfilling the mitzvah of davening with the minyan. We're not just fulfilling a mitzvah of davening 3 times a day, but we fulfill it with a simcha, with exuberance. We come back to shul with tears coming down our cheeks because we are thankful and we serve God with gladness. We serve God with enthusiasm. We serve God out of gratefulness. May it be this Rosh Hashanah that we are able to fulfill the words of David HaMelech. And may that wish be fulfilled. May it be that when we say, all we have is one wish, that we get to reside in the house of the Lord for all the days of our life. And may it be so for us this Rosh Hashanah, now and forevermore. Amen.